Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Mulligan, and welcome to the workshop on Write Your Bio. Now, many of you have attended the Create Your Brand workshop. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we have the same story there. We talk about the Once Upon a Time, and once upon a time, the Job Hunter's Toolbox was dedicated to developing those hard copy tools, the resumes that were always typed and printed out and mailed, the presentation statements, which might have been 2 minutes, and cover letters, which of course were the same thing, printed and mailed. And then along came the internet and the concept of personal branding. And we needed to change the way that we communicate because we find now that we communicate a lot more frequently, and we really must be aware of all the tools that are out there, particularly those tools that are going to attract attention in this new world of information overload. So your task, leverage your communications and your marketing collateral to ensure that you stand apart from the crowd. And today we're going to show you just how to do that. So welcome to the workshop on Write Your Bio. Our goal for you today is to understand the purpose of a biography. We hope that you will reach some great conclusions as to whether you need that biography in your toolkit, and how would you distinguish between when you might use the bio and when you might use some other written communications that you might have, like the resume. We're also going to talk about how to test the impact of your biography and give you some suggested guidelines. Now, finally, we're going to help you get started writing your own bio, much like we help you learn to capture the important information on your resume. And your task is to remember that, again, just like the resume, this is your bio, and you must be willing to do the work if that bio is kind of to take on a life of its own. And like your resume, you may have different versions of your bio depending on your objective and on the audience. This slide illustrates the importance of creating and defining one's brand as the center point of all the marketing tools. Now, it allows you to reflect your brand in the resume, the online web presence, the presentation statement, the bio. Let's just take a moment to go through each of those. But before I get started, anybody have a definition of a brand for me? And go ahead and raise your hand or just throw it up there in text chat for us. But how would we define a brand? Now, for those of you that have taken the Create Your Brand workshop, give me a green check. You're probably pretty familiar with it. But if you haven't taken that one, it's a must-do on your transition plan. But let me just give you a definition of a brand. And I'm going to talk about it as a memorable, short soundbite that influences the decisions of the reader or the listener. So a soundbite that influences the decision. And we are definitely trying to influence the decision as we go through a transition. So, the resume is a must-have for your marketing toolkit, as well as correspondence, emails, cover letters. Every tool in your toolkit should be the reflection of you or your brand. And it can be represented in all of these, in your business cards. And perhaps if you're opening your own business, you have a brochure or a portfolio. Each one of these needs to reflect what it is that you're passionate about. We'll talk a little bit about your online web presence a lot more in the Create Your Brand workshop. But today, that is your calling card, your online web presence. And it really needs to reinforce your objective. The presentation statement is a phrase that's used interchangeably with a lot of things. We talk about the presentation statement in depth in the networking workshop because sometimes we define the presentation statement as a little broader introduction. And we talk about the branded introduction as something a little shorter. When we talk about the bio today, we're going to make it really clear that we want your brand illustrated here. So all of these things come together. There should be some cohesion, and there should be the repetition of the same ideas in each one of these marketing tools. So if you begin to think about your brand as where you are today, where you want to go, That's the same thing that we'll do when we think about developing the bio. It's something that gives the person a quick, well, let me turn to the next slide and let me define what a bio is for you. But I think today that when we think about it, we definitely want to keep the brand as part of it. But if we wanted to define it sort of very quickly, it's short, it's clear. It tells the reader who you are and what you want to do in terms of the relevant experience. You try to highlight that so that you can engage the reader and help you achieve your career goals. This is what we're focusing on today. It's not a laundry list of your accomplishments, sometimes like the resume often is. It's really just a highlight of your best accomplishments, usually limited to one or two. And it's intended to capture the listener's or the reader's attention to want to know more about you from their perspective. Now, more about your career, your expertise, how you can help them. So think for a moment of a powerful biography maybe you've read. Maybe it's the cover of a good book. Maybe you've been introduced to someone that you really want to make the effort to know. Well-written biographies will always focus on a central message that's intended to connect you to that reader. So we want it to be clear and concise and get to the point quickly. One way to think about a bio as contrasted with a resume is to think about it as a compelling advertisement. So let's build on that idea of a biography as an ad for you. First, you want to grab the reader's attention. Now, when contrasted with many resumes, you see that grabbing attention to an advance, an introduction, or a relationship is just critical. Let's face it, sometimes resumes can be boring. They can begin to read alike. And it's sometimes more difficult to establish a uniqueness in a resume. Marketing agencies get the big bucks, to quickly grab your attention, and that's what the bio does. Now, you're probably saying, whoa, should I use the bio in place of a resume? Well, not when you're directly applying for a job, but we're going to talk a little bit more about when the bio is more appropriate than the resume. Second, saving the reader's time. This is so critical. It's just a time of information overload right now, and short matters. Think about the number of emails that you receive daily. Don't you appreciate it when somebody makes their point quickly and in an interesting way? How about voicemail? How many long-winded messages do you really want to listen to, all the way through? It's almost embarrassing for that person sometimes. Third, the message in a bio is clear and straightforward. It gets to the point fast, and the what's in it for them is blindingly obvious. Now, fourth, and of course the bottom line, is you want to make it easy for people to want to help you because they do get the message in a fast and interesting way. Now, we're going to take a look at some bios today, but we'll tell you frequently the next two bios that we look at, or any bios that we look at, they may speak powerfully to you and they may not, because that's really the point. Each reader will see what they like or dislike in any communication, and that's why a bio is always targeted to the audience. So I'd like to show you an example of our first bio here, and this is Madison Hawthorne. And let me pull up the full sort of version of this document so that you can see it a little better. And we're waiting for that to come up, but meanwhile, of course, you can read this. There we go. Now you should have a scroll bar, and that gives you the ability to sort of scroll down and take a look at this and give me a green check when you're finished reading through it. Now, some of you must be intrigued as you read through this, but let's talk about it a little bit. First, what would you say Madison's brand is? Any ideas? As I said, go ahead, raise your hand, send it into text chat. Where do you see Madison's brand? Let's do it this way. Do you think conflict resolution bilingual? Okay, conflict manager. So both of you are going here. And I think one of the reasons you're going there is because you're expecting to see that there. You're expecting to see that at the top. You're expecting to see sort of a short phrase. But one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is think about if this brand is something that you can remember. Sometimes we want to say too much. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If we take a look at this phrase, a force for constructive change, that may be a little more memorable. So we want to make sure that we don't trade that off and use something that's not memorable, like bilingual, conflict resolution, and organization development strategist and tactician. Okay, so think about that. What about the language? Do you think it's impactful? Give me a green check if you like the language that you see here. A red X if you just didn't like the language very well. Okay. And if you have any comments about what it is that you didn't like, and perhaps I'm going to clear those X's, but Amy and Chris, if you could want to make some comments for us, let me ask this question too. Did you not like the language maybe because you thought it was too long, too lengthy? See, Amy, I read your mind. Chris, the same thing. Okay. So perhaps it wasn't the words, it was just there were way too many of them. Now this is one page. Not sure if you could pick that up. It is a one-page bio, but maybe like Amy and Chris are saying, a little bit too much information. Let's focus for a moment on these endorsements or these testimonials. Did you like these? And when I say did you like them, did you like seeing them there? Okay. Lori's saying yes. Not necessarily if you liked the content. All right. So we like seeing them there, and I'm going to agree with that because this is something that we get to say about ourselves that can't be included in a resume, very often. But I always think it's interesting. We find that many people who get a testimonial or a recommendation like this realize the powerful way that someone is describing them and often are find tips into how to describe themselves. So if you've got any testimonials, go back and take a look when you're developing your bio, also as a way to describe yourself. Now, one other point I want to make, it's written in the third person. We speak about Madison Hawthorne and we use her name or the pronoun she or her. You never use the word I in this bio, and that's just the format we're looking for. This is a sales document, but it's also a very revealing document about who she is. So quite different from the resume. And so you're once again thinking, well, when do I use it then? And there's just going to be different times and different reasons for using different tools forever in life. There's tools for every different purpose. And both tools, both the bio and the resume, may be equally important to your job search campaign. Both are choices you make when building your toolkit. Both have an audience, and of course, they're situational. So when applying for a particular position, resumes are still the preferred marketing tool for recruiters and hiring managers. Sometimes they're often used to screen you out rather than screen you in. And I think that, that's something that's very frustrating as you go through a transition. Now, when you're networking, a little bit different. you're not implying that you're looking for a job as the main objective. Rather, you're networking to seek information, to ask for help, or ask for advice. So in that sense, a bio may be a better tool to screen you in and sort of support that initial relationship building that occurs during the early stages of networking when you're creating that interest in who you are and trying to leave that memorable impression of what you do. So if we think back to Madison Hawthorne, you might recall a force for constructive change is kind of an easy way to remember her. So biographies have a more open structure than resumes, and that really enables you to convey your uniqueness, your story, and your brand. And they tell who you are, your values, your interests, your passions, your character, and even somehow how that person might benefit from your expertise and experience. So the focus is not solely on what you do, which tends to be the primary focus of a resume. In the bio, there's just more room for individual expression. It can have interesting and creative use of language and powerful branding that really serves as a differentiator, causes you to be more memorable to the reader. Now, bios offer more latitude to you in sharing personal touch points that probably resonate with the audience. You have license to include your favorite quote, a joke, or a humorous story. You can use the testimonials from others to tout your brand and expertise, all of which could not be included in a resume. Besides establishing relationships in those networking venues and affiliations with those national and local professional organizations, bios can be useful to sort of strengthen and establish your credibility in business or in a part of a sales proposal. It is the tool of choice for consultants and entrepreneurs to market themselves as an independent professional. Now, for introductions in a speaking engagement, if you've been asked to speak to a group, a bio would be the most appropriate way to present your credentials or introduce yourself. And of course, if you're trying to introduce yourself to some new team members. Even if you're presenting your credentials to a board of director, for a leadership role in a professional association or a nonprofit. Now, bios are often magically transformed into the LinkedIn profile as well. In other words, your online presence will more often than not be a reflection or a variation, an edit of your bio versus an edit of your resume. So your online social presence will be just a little bit of a different format than your resume. Now, you can't underestimate the need for a powerful resume in your toolkit because they're still the preferred tool to use in job search to open those doors and land the interviews. And what better way to prepare to shine in the interview than writing and reviewing your resume? You know, once they have it in their hands, they have the questions that they're going to ask you. But you get your foot in the door, and that's really what the main purpose of the resume is. But the resume, once again, helps them conduct the interview. Perhaps you're in an alliance. You have a big networking group or an alliance that's going to help you out. They're really on the hunt to help you find that next opportunity. And they often want to see the resume so they know how to target some opportunities for you. And it really does focus on what you've done, on your skill set, your achievements, and it's a great selling tool. And if you're working with a search firm or any kind of employment agency, you know, they'll want your resume to sort of explore those potential positions for you. Now, one of the key ingredients to the job search is to manage your references, and you'll want those individuals to support you and to sort of corroborate your experience and your work ethic, and they'll need your resume. And once again, if you haven't started working with your references, understand that they need your resume because they need to very specifically see where you add value and strategic impact and what some of your greatest contributions have been. They may have only worked with you in sort of one sense, one leg of your history. And then, of course, once you start, land your job, you'll be networking inside the company, and who knows, you probably need a bio or a resume at that time as well. So really, we can go pro and con, pro and con, pro and con. Which one should I use in this particular situation? Well, you just have to make that evaluation. There isn't any reason sometimes not to contribute to, but think about how can you gain their attention. And quite often, sort of a short, clear, concise message, the bio will gain their attention, and then the resume is going to help to make that sale. So the test of a great bio, it intrigues the reader. It's creative, it's truthful, of course. We don't, ever suggest you put anything out there that isn't a true reflection, a true demonstration of what you've done. And it intrigues the reader. They want to know more about you. It improves the sort of grasp of the obvious. If you stay focused on fewer messages, you kind of use some simple language. A couple of you said, boy, that language was over the top for Madison. But you want them to get your message and to remember it. So, focus, clear, crisp, that's really what it is. Are you the one standing out in the eyes of that recruiter? And then you want to make the connection, because that's really what it's all about, causing him or her to want to get to know you better. So how do you demonstrate a link? And that's what the purpose is, to start, the bio starts to build on that, so they'll really want to get to know you. Any questions, any comments? I'm going to pause here. Okay. Well, I'd like you to meet William Arruda. And William Arruda has a specialty, and it's branding. Now, William Arruda, I'm going to just pause for a moment because I'd like you to sort of read a personal introduction to William. Now, William Arruda is the one that has developed this website called reachcc.com. If you take and create your brand, you've been introduced to William already. And we're going to highly encourage you to get out to that website to learn more about branding. Now, a couple of things I want to ask you some questions. First of all, what about the language here? Do you like the language that you're seeing here? Okay, thanks, Amy. Do you think that some of the things that he said are kind of memorable? Mild, wild, wide grin, crackling energy. So easy to understand what he's best at. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, it's very well written in the sense that it's intriguing. We kind of want to learn a little bit more, but yet it does give us some information, doesn't it? Now, this one, of course, pretty short, but it tells us a lot. They talk about the fact that he has a lot of corporate experience, and then they start to mention some of the companies that he's worked with. So that's adding some credibility for somebody that would like to know that. Let me show you a second sort of introduction to William Arruda. And you can see this is a little, I'm going to say calmer, not quite as, has not the same visual language that we saw in the other one. So why would he have two? Because you need to make one that's appropriate. And this may have been more appropriate for the business situation that he is in. Right away he starts talking about 20 years of corporate branding experience. He gets that right up front. So that's got to be a clear message that he wanted to get across. He talks about being global before he talked about being 20,000 feet up. Once again, he mentioned some of the companies that he's worked with. So if you have the basis of information, you're likely to want to sort of put it in couple of different formats and share it that way. So William Arruda, we highly recommend that you take a look there. Let's move on to some more basics though. There's guidelines that we're going to share here for writers, and pretty much we're going to talk about 6 guidelines, and boy, they seem pretty simple, but yet sometimes when you sit down to write, it seems very complex. So these are the kinds of guidelines that will help you before, during, and after you complete. We'll just take a look at each one of these in sequence and learn a little bit more about them. So let's start with the context. Context is a way of weaving together your biography in order to give it meaning. By staying focused on 2 or 3 messages, you just help the reader see your message as well as read your message. And think about your sentence structure when it comes to creating context. Begin and end your paragraphs with your 2 or 3 most important messages, rather than including them there in the middle where they may never get noticed. In fact, it's a really good idea to keep your paragraphs to about 6 typed lines, because people do tend to skim over longer paragraphs and they might miss exactly what you're trying to tell them. Now, stay very action-oriented, very positive in your outlook. One of the reasons that we like the third-party endorsements is because they can say something a little different than what you can put down there. And they can also get a lot of sort of information in a small space, if that makes sense, because it's something that's coming from another person, and it's hopefully giving a true picture and a true reflection of what you want to tell people. It's a way to humanize you because it is coming from someone else, and it's a way to help tell your story and tell why you are unique. And at the same time, it's giving them information about yourself. Now, don't overwhelm the reader with your credentials. They can just become tedious when they're overused, and they really do undermine your attempts to create that connection with the reader. Include only the most important, those that support your message and your story. Guideline number 2, the font and the type selection. As we mentioned, this may often be printed and distributed. So in that case, we want our piece of paper to look nice. 11 or 12-point font, off-white paper always looks good. Limit the changes in the font, limited use of italics. We put a couple of different fonts here. As you can see, they all look a little different. And so try, write your bio out and then change the font on the page and see the way it splits the words up and sort of positions it and makes it look better. Try it a couple of different ways to see what you like, but don't go to something that's really, really unusual. Try to stay with something that's fairly common. The language and the style. You have the license to sort of put your style and personality into this and use the powerful words that the reader can see. Avoid some jargons and cliches because you do want to be unique and grab attention, and you want to be remembered. You're always going to write in that third person, so use your name or use the pronoun he or she. And if we wanted to think about memorable, can we think back to William Arruda? And he introduced himself as Ask William Arruda about personal branding, and you'll get a mile-wide grin, crackling energy, and a lively discussion of how personal branding can make every facet of career and life more engaging, fun, and successful. So, a philosophy, good language. He led the paragraph with the most important point, which also happens to be his brand, okay? So we have some examples that we want to show you, but here on the right, you can see there's just some words and phrases that are just overused. So perhaps if we think back to, gosh, even Madison Hawthorne's, if you want to convey interpersonal influence as a turnaround and change expert, you might describe it, helped people to change their attitudes of fear and uncertainty to excitement and anticipation about the newly restructured organization. So does this describe you? But has a turnaround and change expert, that phrase quite often used, maybe a little too often, perhaps. So give it the description, describe it a little bit more. Maybe if you're a P&L manager, you can say, I'm a revenue accelerator. Um, there's a lot of people that do customer service, and they often will say, I'm a customer service representative. Maybe you're a customer evangelist. What we're trying to get to is to have people sort of see the passion about what you do, so that will bring people in when you talk about your passion. Eye appeal, as we said in the earlier guideline, of course, if it's a printed page, you want it to look good. Change your fonts around, see if you have a better look with your white space. Paragraph 6 or 7 lines. No typos, they're evident to everyone but the writer. So it's quite often too much information, and I can't tell you how many resumes we see when we say that they were a great manger, because of course spell check doesn't catch manger. So my advice is print it out and read it that way. I wish we had printed this out a little bit earlier because we didn't realize all our words would be going together, but maybe that's the good message. It is the silence between the notes that creates the symphony. So when your presentation, your visual appeal, your white space, that causes that reader to want to read it. Keep it short, as long as you can sort of keep their interest. In some cases, it's very difficult for you to write your own because you want them people to know everything about you. But we're never going to exceed 1 page. Shorten your credentials. Rein in the alphabet after your name. It may be appropriate on one version of your bio if it's to people in a professional organization that understand that. But quite often there's professional credentials that aren't as well known as others. And then you need to draft, test it out, edit it, test it out, check it against the guidelines that we talked about, get feedback from others, and just rewrite it. This step is so important to your success. And just like the resume, you may have several versions depending on your objectives and your audience. So one of the famous quotes we like to share with people is this James Michener one. I may not be the world's best writer, but I'm the world's best rewriter. So even famous authors have to go through this. And if you get input and incorporate that input into your rewrites, I think you'll be more satisfied. So here's a checklist one more time of the messages and the guidelines. And just a quick reminder, if you like to have a copy of this, of course, it's in the presentation notes, which are available in the library. So you simply go to the library, go to the online workshop folder and the presentation notes, and you'll find the notes for every workshop that we offer. Let's take a look at Andy Waterman. This is another bio. I'm showing it to you this way because I want to share with you that we picked this bio up from an online source. And as such, remember, if you find bios on an online source, we're going to suggest that you do that. But we want you to know that if you can see somebody else's bio, they can see yours. So that's just sort of a caution. Now, I don't want to take a lot of our time today reading through this whole thing, but I would like you to skim it. So go ahead and do a quick skim. Just take a note of a few things and give me a green check when you're completed. you might have thought, okay, yeah, I'm reading through this, but what you may not have realized is that there's actually 2 pages to this bio. So it continues on and on and on. Give me a green check if you like this bio, and give me a red X if you think, I don't think of this as a bio. Yeah, this seems more like an autobiography that should be in print, doesn't it? It's difficult to understand his message. He's all over the place. Um, I just laugh when I see this. You know, where he lives is fine, but he has to put the name of his wife there. I just think it's so funny that, the information that's on here is just enormous. And the other thing that maybe you noticed, give me a green check if you noticed this. Did you notice who the testimonial was from? Yeah, Chris picked up on that. You really shouldn't include your testimonial on yourself in your own bio. Not quite sure what he was thinking here, but we're certainly not seeing back to our guidelines, are we? Obviously way too long, too much information. We can't see what the message is. There's not 2 or 3 messages here. Now, perhaps you're thinking, well, but this is a guy that's done a lot, and this is a high-level consultant, and so, he should have a bio like this. And maybe you're thinking, I, I'm really not in that same position. And so why do I need a bio? It's more geared towards someone like this. And I want to share with you that bios are for everybody. We like to give you a quick look at a bio of one of our consultants. And Pam Henry, she left corporate America and decided to have a little small consulting business. And, you know, look at some of the visual language that she's used to describe herself. And look at sort of the very clear branded message right here. And once again, still putting some experience down here, not taking away from that. But just as with some of the other ones, I also have a longer version of a Pam Henry bio to share with you. Now you're seeing her photo on this bio, and a photo is a good selling point today. It's in the old HR days, we would not want to include photos, but today people want to get to know people. They want to get to know them a little more personally. So on LinkedIn, on a bio, it's fine to put a photo. Honestly, I think this one's a little large. I think I would size that a little bit smaller, but once again, you need to sort of look at your page. This is a one-page bio. There's some testimonials in here. Are they good testimonials? Are they giving the messages of what you want? That's what you want to make sure, that it's the right message for you. But the context, the font, the type, the language, the style, is it eye-appealing? Does it grab your attention? And finally, do you have a sense of what she does and what she can offer to you? So those are some examples of bios that we wanted to share with you today, because one of the ways that it's going to help you write your own bio is for you to look at others. So when we talk about how you can start the process, collect different models of bios, take a look at book covers, take a look at some of the books that are out there on self-branding. Look at different websites. People are sponsoring their own websites, like William Arruda. How do they describe it? Or learn about us, know about us, or contact us about us. Quite often they'll have a little personal bio about someone from that company in there. Of course, LinkedIn is 100 million strong. Does everyone have a bio in there? No. Does everyone have sometimes just the top of their resume in there? Yes. But I think you're going to find many different examples there of people that are really talking about their passion, what they can do for other people, and trying to make that introduction a little unique. So really look around, get some ideas of what you would like, and then start talking to your colleagues about perhaps bios that they've seen that sort of inspired them. Talk to your consultant about the different ideas as well. And finally, we are going to send you to a sort of a series of websites, and you can get there by starting off in IMPAXIS, go to the links directory, prepare for the job search section, and you'll see once you click on biographies, sort of an assortment or a selection of websites that would be valuable to you. And I think that more people start to feel comfortable getting started after they've sort of read a couple of them and kind of decided what's your communication style. And so you need to learn the guidelines, you need to figure out your central message, and then you just need to begin and keep writing. I think one of the best tools we have to offer you is the personal branding worksheet from the IMPAXIS library. It's in the Create Your Brand folder. And if you have not worked on this yet, it's kind of going to have a dual purpose for you. It'll get you started on creating your own brand because it gets you started to think about it. And then once you do the work, I think you'll find a lot of your content for your bio will have been created. So the worksheet is a series of questions. You work on the responses, and those responses will tend to be the outline for your bio. So I'm highly encouraging that you work on this personal branding worksheet. I also wanted to mention I had a suggestion from one of the participants in this workshop, and they said, I just cannot sit down and write. I just sit there and I'm looking at the blank screen. And so someone said, well, maybe you have somebody interview you. Maybe you get a friend or a colleague to sort of ask you questions as if they were writing an in-depth profile on you, and then record that session. And once you have verbalized your responses to some of these questions, it's easier for you to transcribe what you've said and put it on paper. Does anybody think that might work best for them? Give me a green check if that might be the way you approach it. Okay. Yeah, it's each of us has a different sort of way that we're going to work best with writing, and perhaps if you've already sort of struggled through the resume, you found a formula on how to do that as well. So that is intact what we wanted to share with you today in this workshop, but I am happy to take any more questions. I know we moved through the information and the samples pretty quickly, and I'm happy to walk back and take a look at any one of them. So if you're struggling to write your resume, my recommendation is step away from the resume, work on the bio, understand really clearly what your important messages are, and it will help you go back and edit that resume. And feel free to make the changes and get the right product out there. So thank you for attending the workshop. We wish you all the best.